Hello, folks. Welcome to another episode of Explicit Materia, the podcast where a nerdy drummer talks to his friends. Follow me on Twitter at The Wise Drums, Instagram at Wise Drums, Facebook at Wise Drums, or at Explicit Materia. And of course, subscribe to youtube.com/Wise Drums, where I post clips of this podcast and other stuff like my new commentary video on the very anticipated new upcoming video game Cyberpunk 2077, which will be the subject of this episode, incidentally. And please check out my new drum cover of the drum sound and bass line remix of Moby's song After. I know that's a lot to remember, but I realize that. It's from a scene in the movie Charlie Countryman. A good movie, better song. If you're easily offended by any controversial / satirical or seemingly offensive material, please move on. This podcast is not for you. Any disagreements you might have with the points presented, I'd love to hear what you have to say via Twitter or the YouTube comment section. What you'll be experiencing today is a talk about video games with none other than Evan Mckee. We get into the controversy behind Cyberpunk 2077's reveal of the game being mostly set in first person. We ask the fundamental question: is this a valid controversy, or is it just whining from a loud minority? I fall more on the valid side, and Evan more or less falls on the other side. So it was a fun and lively discussion, as it always is with Mr. Mckee. We also talk briefly about the future of single-player games and other stuff as well. Also, side note, we apologize for the crude audio from Evan's Skype call. His good, clean audio somehow got lost in the shuffle during the recording, so we only had the audio from the Skype session, so I'm sorry. It's still good. Evan's essence is still there. Evan's essence. That's funny. Anyway, it's still good. So sit back, relax, whatever you do when listening to podcasts. Here we go. Right.
Yeah?
Yeah, we're good. We're set.
Things have been happening?
Things have been happening. Man. It worked. Cool. Like a charm. I'm recording. Awesome. I'm recording. We're good. I love it.
All right. All you got to do is tell me when to start recording and we can get this bad boy going.
Record. Start it.
All right, I think that'll work.
Evan Mckee is back with us. I mean,
in the flesh.
It's always a pleasure. I love you. I wish you still lived here.
I do too. Shane, I'm gonna be totally honest. I do too. I miss that Nashville traffic. I really miss how it took 40 minutes to get 2 blocks. It was really one of my life highlights, truly.
Yeah, it definitely has.
But in all seriousness, yeah, I like Nashville a lot. We know this. We know.
And
I'll tell you this: it's good to be back on the show because I have I have a lot of conversations with myself in the shower, and I get really worked up about things. And this podcast is kind of my outlet. You know, it's my way of just unleashing all of the nonsense that I have in my brain out on the world.
That's why everyone should have a podcast. If nothing else, just to make the world a better place so you can vent all your stuff into the ether and not at, your job and you get fired.
Thank you. I like to think that if Hitler had a podcast, nobody would have followed him and he could just sit in a room by himself and yell.
Or if the art school just accepted him,
he could have showed them his podcast and they would have accepted him.
So before we get into what we're going to get into, I understand that you got a job.
Yeah. Well,
because last time we talked about like you doing the engineering stuff and.
Yes, I am doing engineering stuff during the summer. I have a very nice and cushy internship that's just 5 minutes away from my house. It feels really good. And then in the fall, I'm going to go back. UT is going to pay me to go to grad school there. And so I'll get to do that whole thing. And when I come out, I'm going to have a master's in electrical engineering. It's going to be great.
Dude, that's awesome. I'm so happy for you, dude. That's so cool.
I know.
At least, you hear people going to college and nothing happens for like however many years, but you went and did it, and you're making things happen in a relatively quick fashion.
I did, and I'm very focused about it. I'm not here to find myself or to take a journey of self-discovery. I just want a job and money, and and money. More importantly, money. But
yes, of course. There's one thing I forgot to do. Hang on 1 second. Okay, that's it. It's for sound purposes.
I know you're proud of me, Shane, but you don't gotta just start clapping out of nowhere.
I'm gonna do the slow clap and the nod.
What movie is it where the guy always does this? Is it not Another Teen Movie where the one guy has the slow clap at the wrong time? Oh man, what a great movie!
What movie
I just got done
that?
watching Gangs in New York, so I'm on a movie high right now because anything with Daniel Day-Lewis, right?
Oh, dude, yes. I've been meaning to watch Lincoln. It's in my list in Netflix.
It's on Netflix now. It is.
We actually went on this M. Night Shyamalan. Shyamalan, right?
Malama Ding Dong, yeah.
We went on this M. Night Shyamalan kick. Like, we went and watched all of his movies, all the good ones anyway. Not The Happening. All of them except for The Happening in the Village.
The last Avatar. No.
Avatar?
Yeah.
Oh, The Last Airbender. You mean The Last Airbender?
Last Airbender, yeah. Okay,
you said Avatar.
My bad. Whatever. I'm sorry. Sorry. I know that nothing I say from now on counts.
We got on that kick because we watched. Me and Ash both watched Split for the first time.
Is that any good?
Oh, it's great. It's so good. It's so good. It's M. Night at his best, you know?
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, because they have the Glass or whatever. And it's like all three of them.
And
it's James McAvoy, Bruce Willis, and okay. Tell me about that.
If you guys are into the movie Unbreakable, which if you're not, you just need to stop listening or watching this podcast because it's a fucking fantastic movie.
Unbreakable is my favorite M. Night Shyamalan movie. It is my favorite.
So in the movie Split, slight spoilers, but I'm not going to spoil the movie too much for you. Yeah. It's sort of in that same vein. It's sort of, and then they start to allude certain things about these universes, and that's all I'm going to say because you need to watch the movie and it'll get you excited.
So they are at least tangentially connected, is what you mean? Okay.
I don't want. Yeah, but I mean that's pretty well known now. The movie's been out for 2 years,
sure.
But you gotta watch it in order to get the excitement for the next movie that's coming out, Glass. So I'm
like
super
James
stoked.
McAvoy a lot, so I'll check it out.
He nailed that part. He nailed, because he's supposed to have split personalities, multiple personalities, and he does a lot, and he does a really good job of doing it. Who else was tapped for that part was Joaquin Phoenix.
Really?
Yeah, Joaquin Phoenix would have done really good too, which, by the way, I don't know if this is exciting to people or disappointing to others. There's going to be 2 Jokers in the next couple years. One being Jared Leto, a Jared Leto sequel to whatever that one movie was. Suicide Squad. And Joaquin Phoenix is going to be another Joker in another movie. Which, honestly, I'm very interested in that because Joaquin Phoenix he's a great actor, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, if you watch, what was that movie where he was playing like he was crazy? Did you ever watch that?
Are you talking about Gladiator?
No. Where he, like I feel like it was 2012 or 2014. He went on all these like talk shows and was acting really erratic and weird. And it turns out it was for this like mockumentary that.
I do. I remember the weirdness. I don't remember any of the like come down afterward where he was like, just kidding. I'm not a weirdo.
Yeah.
And I think so in my mind, he's still a weirdo and he can just do whatever. But I'm kind of interested to see if, from now on, the discussion is not going to be who's the greatest Batman, but who was the greatest Joker. Because we have all these, it's like a role that lends itself to a lot of options. It has a lot of potential and it evolves with the times.
Yeah. All right, well, let's get into it. I wanted to ask you before we get into the main topic of discussion, which would be Cyberpunk 2077.
Don't tease me, Shane.
I actually wanted to. Did you watch any of the E3 this year at all?
This year's E3 was actually jam-packed. I was so excited. It was so dense, and it was like one thing after another. It was like this and this and this. I was on the edge of my seat. I was very excited.
What games are you most excited for?
Well, give me some options, and I'll tell you what I feel about them.
Well, I didn't really get into E3 this year because I don't know why. I just the games that are coming out. I'm like, the only ones that I was really excited for was Last of Us 2. So what do you think about the new Last of Us 2? What's exciting you about that? Did you enjoy the trailer? Did you enjoy?
What's exciting me about it is that's like, I think you know how I feel about zombies. I think there's too many of them. I think there's too much thrown at us. I tried to tag along as long as I could with The Walking Dead, and I think I got out before a lot of people did, but now everybody's jumping off of that ship. And I really just think the zombie thing has been done to death, if you'll excuse, the horrible pun. So The Last of Us was just so refreshing because it was something completely different. It was one of the first of a generation of games that has spawned the new Tomb Raider and the new God of War, which is what I like to call, it's just a movie and then sometimes you play a little bit, but it's a really good movie. And that's what The Last of Us, to me, was like just as much fun to watch as it was to play, which is not always the case. Sometimes somebody's watching a game with you and you're like, hang on, I got to go back to the store to fix my broken weapon, and you're just going to have to sit there while I run across this map. And it's not fun, but The Last of Us, the entire time, it was so much fun to watch, and it was so much fun to experience how it was going. And I was going to talk about this a little later, but I think that having a protagonist who, is fun to be, but also fun to watch, was an integral part of why The Witcher 3 was so fun. And I also, I don't know if you know this, but I got a Switch as a graduation present from my wife.
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
I played through Zelda, and it kind of showed me with a jolt what it's like to have a silent protagonist that you're just supposed to kind of fill with your own personality versus a protagonist that they have given some stuff worth watching and stuff worth listening to.
Right.
And so I so much appreciate games like The Last of Us, where you're like, I'm Joel, but what's Joel gonna do?
Yeah. I'm totally on board with what you're saying. And in that vein, I did want to. Any other games that particularly excite you about E3? Because I didn't really get much into it.
No, we can move on if you want.
Well,
That's
actually,
fine.
I did want to bring up this because I did see this. People are really angry at EA right now for a whole slew of
This is the first time that's ever happened. Yeah,
for a whole slew of different reasons that are quite logical and quite reasonable and quite deserved. But one of them that really caught my eye was people are angry at EA because they're not focusing on single player experiences anymore. They own BioWare, and that scares a lot of people because they're coming out with Anthem and they're really shooting for that Destiny-like, crowd. And meanwhile, all the people who really love the Knights Old Republic, the Dragon Ages, the Mass Effects, they don't want to see those franchises just be lost in the wind because even though Mass Effect Andromeda was kind of a dud for all different reasons, we still want to see that particular franchise or a franchise like that in a single player vein. We want those to succeed because when they work, oh my God, they work. And you don't have to look any further than the new God of War game, which I haven't played yet, but I'm in meaning to play it. But I have heard nothing but just incredible things about the new God of War that's come out. And
so you mean that more that people are worried about the death of these franchises as opposed to people worry about the death of single player as a whole?
No, a single player as a whole. That's what I was just using. I was just using those franchises as examples because
I think there's enough. I think there's enough people like you and me, and what I mean by that is I mean people that know a single player experience for what it is and don't need to share it with anyone for it to be fun. And just thinking about all the games that you named, I don't ever think that a multiplayer thing kind of has to be shoehorned in, because there was a lot of times, I give Breath of the Wild, the new Zelda game, as like an example of this, but there were a lot of times where I got the feeling of like, I'm the first person to ever have that happen to what just happened. Like there's so much kind of randomness to it and so many different options for things that can happen that the ingredients all come together, and it's like, I'm so lucky that I was a part of this event in the game. And that to me, like, the treasure of the single player world is that it's yours. It's all yours, the entire thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And well, people are worried because multiplayer online, Destiny, Battlefront, these games make the studio more money because there's, with like loot boxes and stuff like that. Gamers are rightfully pushing back on that, though. But like, how many gamers are pushing back, and how many gamers are just like, well, I still want to play the game, so I'll buy this loot box and just give them more money. And so people are worried that these companies are going to get so big that they're just going to only focus mainly on the things that make them money,
paths,
things that make them money, and not something that's maybe for the art of the video game itself. Like God of War, from what I've looked at and from what I've seen, and what from a lot of people have said, is like, this game is art. This game is someone's vision. This game is, and who does the God of War games? I forget. Isn't it? I forget who it is. Well, whatever that studio. Whatever that studio is, or that publisher allowed that studio to go,
Santa
all right.
Monica Studios, I think.
Yeah. They said, okay, this is your vision. Go for it. It's a risk, but go for it.
It's uncompromising. It's untarnished by money, kind of. So I can see that. And I think that's understandable to say, like, that I don't want my games to be made by a bunch of suits in a room looking at a graph that says, 0.2% more people want us to make this decision, and it makes us more, and it makes us this much more money. Because I honestly think that almost everything else in the world has gone that way. Yeah. I remember in marketing class we had to study this like case study of like an airline that discovered how many millions of dollars through careful research, how many millions of dollars that they could save by taking one peanut out of every bag of peanuts. And they did it, and they saved that much money, and they were lauded as heroes forever. But it's like that everywhere, Shane. Everything you see is like, there's somebody's job to like chisel you out of more money to like give you less for the same amount of money, and they just squeeze, and they squeeze and squeeze and squeeze. And they come for our video games in this kind of time that really should be a renaissance. Should be, we have the hardware, we have the software, we have the visions of people to throw all this stuff together and make something beautiful, but the suits are still there, and they still want money, and they still want their decisions. And so here, the now that this free-to-play model has been introduced, where they get tons and tons of people to come out in a game like Fortnite, that makes tons and tons of money, because it's like, once the players are there, now they give them some ways to spend some real money. Hey, here's or like Hearthstone, that's free to play, but hey, here's some things to spend money on while you're here. Yeah. And they end up making way more than the labor of love $60 single player game that the $60 ends. The money collection begins and ends with that $60 purchase. Right. And so I feel like I'm not so much worried about EA as I'm just worried about my cynical mind is thinking, are video games going to be ruined the way that the rest of the world has, little by little, with that squeeze, that ever increasing squeeze.
Hopefully not. Hopefully the technology gets a lot more easy. Hopefully the technology to make great single player experiences, like what was it, Hellblade that came out recently? It was only it was a very short campaign relatively. It's only 15 hours, but the game was only $30. They only sold it for it was only, I think you could buy it physical copy, but I think mostly people downloaded it, I think. But people loved it. People absolutely loved it, and it was quite a success because it was, like you said, a labor of love, and people, that sort of experience was just, you can't get that in any other form,
My experience with multiplayer, and I know I've talked to you with this before, has been, I get the game way after everybody else has already mastered it, no matter how early I get. I go online and I'm just immediately obliterated and have no desire to keep playing. That's
Same
the
here.
multiplayer experience to me.
Same here. I don't do the multiplayer thing. I liked Halo when it was out, but I liked it because I got to play it in proximity with my friends in the same house. And so it was more...
that has gone the way of the wind. There's no more split screen anything these days.
Right. And it was, or like linking. You can't even link your, you can't even link your Xboxes together like you could in the old days. That's what we did. We just all were in separate rooms and we would talk to each other. We would turn off the chat and we talk to each other and we like, oh, he's in the basement, get him, yeah. Or you stay here, I'll go up.
In a room against another room of your friends is an experience that I really miss, and I don't know that we'll ever get.
No,
I don't know we'll ever get it accommodated again. Mm-mm. If there's any hope for that, then Nintendo is the hope for that, because I have seen now that the Switch is a very pro gamer console, and all of the design decisions are based on making a player happy. You remember how we just talked about how like a lot of times people make this like decision, developers make a decision and they want a little bit more money. Well, back in the day, if you bought a console, you had to immediately spring another $40-$50 and get a second controller so that so-and-so could play, right?
Yeah.
But I've been playing co-op with my wife with what we bought directly out of the box, because the Switch controller can be turned sideways and you can be, she can be Mario's hat. I can be Mario. That level of inclusivity is about what you would imagine, but it helps because one of us is a lot better at video games than the other one, and I'm not going to denigrate anyone by telling you which of us is better. But you see what I mean? Like, dude, I didn't have to go out and buy another controller, and Nintendo said, this is for the players, we're going to do this, and we're going to make less money, but it's going to be the right decision anyway.
Well, yeah, they might make more money in the long run because it's a risk. Nintendo is good at they take risks. They go against the grain all the time because they're always thinking outside the box, and sometimes they get bit for it. Look at the Wii U. With the Switch, everyone thought, well, a handheld console, they already have a handheld console. I don't know if this is going to work. And then, boom, here comes the Switch. Everyone fucking loved it. Everybody that touched that thing was like, I love this. I love this. And it's such a simple idea. Just make a handheld that can slip into your TV, and then make it easy, make it accessible to the gamers. Don't make them pay for anything they don't need to pay for. Well, the Pro controller is a little expensive, but whatever. They did good as far as keeping the players in mind, keeping the gaming community in mind. And I think sometimes, like a jilted lover, the gaming community feels like they have been forgotten, or they feel like as though they, somebody is going after money instead of what they feel. And that may be why the gaming community is so loud and forceful with certain opinions on things, whether or not they're right or not. So that's a great segue. Let's move into the main topic of conversation, which is Cyberpunk 2077. And I think I'm gonna name this episode "To Third Person or First Person." That is the question.
All right.
I think
let's do it.
That's a good one. So you watched my video. For those that haven't watched it, it's on youtube.com/wisedrums. It's labeled "Why I May Not Buy Cyberpunk 2077 on Day 1. Now, I probably still will buy the game because I love me some CD Projekt Red, and they have never done me wrong. Ever. So I owe it to them to at least buy the game at some point. However,
yes,
in my video, I do describe why certain people would go, first person, I don't really like first person games. I'm a little scared here. And so people would voice those opinions on Reddit and Twitter, sometimes forcefully. Well, a lot forcefully.
Most of the time forcefully.
and then arguments happen. Like that one argument, I can't remember what website I sent you that link.
Dude, we were ripping on these people on a forum who were, because basically it had been announced, or it had been revealed that their new, the people that made The Witcher 3, which was such a great third-person game, were going to make this new game, Cyberpunk 2077, and it was going to be all first-person. And you would have thought that the world you would have thought that Mountain Dew was getting discontinued for all of the angry video gamers out there shaking their Cheeto dust covered hands. And we did. Shane showed me some stuff that people were saying on the forum, and it was I was just absolutely amazed. Even one guy was like a go-between, and he was like, I just want to know, if you guys care this much about a video game, how do you handle actual real dilemmas in real life?
Oh, man.
And I found myself asking the same question. But that was, the thrust, I think, of Shane's video was, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to put any words in your mouth.
Okay.
We had such great potential for another Witcher-like game, but putting it in first person, which I know that you personally don't like, that, almost anything in first person, you're like, it cuts me out. Or whatever. So there's like somebody being forgotten or disenfranchised.
So let me try to break this down for people who are already screaming at me for voicing my opinion on first person games. I think first person games are great, and I think if you love them, go for it. And a lot of my friends are way into first person games, and I used to play them all the time with my friends, so I get it, man. I get it. But when I'm playing first person games in a single player experience, I somehow get disconnected or not immersed after a while. I'll start to play it, and then I'm like, there's something about this perspective that that doesn't jive with me. And it
something
might be
about maybe the camera facing away from the main character the whole time is like the meanness isn't there, because when I can see my character. Wait, well, I don't want to get into your head. Just explain.
Well, you're on the right track a little bit. So what my thoughts are, and the reason why I'm uncomfortable with playing first-person perspective games, is that a lot of people think that the first person is more immersive, and you can definitely make an argument for that. However, I feel for some people like myself get cut out because my brain is telling me, oh, we're going forward, oh, we're going to the right, oh, we're going to the left, but it's not happening, it's not connecting in my mind because all my other senses aren't being activated. So, because a lot of people, like say that, oh, it's immersive, you're seeing through the character's eyes. Like, yeah, you're seeing through the character's eyes, but you don't have peripheral vision. You aren't using the when you walk forward, the wind is hitting your face. You can feel the steps that you're taking on the ground. When you get hit, you get hit in the face, you can feel it, so
So because first person is such a poor facsimile of reality, it's not a good idea to say that it's immersive any more than third person. Is that what you mean?
Yes, because you're sort of seeing, like, people say you're seeing through the character's eyes, but you're really not. You're seeing through the character's box. It's a box. It's like you're seeing through a TV. Really, I don't know. Other people can be immersed in those kinds of games because they can do that. But with a third person perspective, it kind of maybe it fills in the gap of those other senses, because I can sort of imagine the wind blowing on my character's face as his hair is moving, or if he's wearing a coat, his coat is blowing in the wind. And I know these are very what's the word I'm looking for? Aesthetic things. But that is a factor, especially in role-playing games, because when you create a character, and this has been an argument that's been going on in all the forums, which it's a valid argument, because modern RPGs for the longest time are vastly favoring a camera that is focused on your character 90% of the time. Isometric views, third person, Final Fantasy, JRPGs, all the JRPGs are in some form seeing your character because there's animation involved. And so the developers want you to look at this character and go, look what we drew. We drew this for you. Okay. So enjoy it, you fucks.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. But yeah, so I kind of started rambling there for a second, but that's sort of
you had No, I'm really glad that you brought up about the immersion factor, and you really put it in a way that I never considered before. How a first-person perspective can actually be more constrictive, and you kind of feel less in control, so to speak. And I'm really glad that you put it that way. I just want to know. I think maybe somebody might come along, that is skeptical like myself, and say what he really wants, even though he's making up all these other excuses. What he really wants is for the game to be Witcher in space. Witcher 4, Witcher goes to space. And that's what he really wants. So he's going to see that if anything is not like The Witcher, he's going to be mad and say, oh, no, what is this first-person stuff? The Witcher wasn't like that, so I don't like it.
Well, okay, so let me... Now, I go through this in my video a little bit, and... that's a valid... I think that's valid. And this is why. Because... Well, maybe not valid, but it makes sense why people would be upset because it's not a Witcher 4 in space.
Does it?
Okay, so hear me out. So this game has been in development and announced for 6 years, and then throughout
it's been a long time.
And throughout its time, they were saying, okay, it's going to have third-person elements, first-person elements, and we were like, oh, okay. So it's your guys are pulling from Fallout and Skyrim. Okay, we can get behind that, and you guys are a great company. So maybe you guys would fix the issues that those games have when it comes to switching in between first and third person, because they do have issues. Some people like playing third.
Let's mention at this point, since you brought up Fallout, let's talk about the dialogue camera. Because in Fallout 4, you remember, they kind of solved that problem of, well, I never see my character. When your character talks to someone, the camera goes back and forth between your character and whoever they're talking to. And that gives you a little chance, doing something you do a lot in the game. So even though it's first person, you can still see your character every now and then, see all the customization. Yeah.
Well, and you can toggle between the two. You can play third person the whole entire game if you want.
Yeah, just like Skyrim.
Yeah, which I enjoyed. I think they fixed a lot of the stuff from Skyrim in Fallout 4 when it comes to the third-person toggle and the first-person stuff they fixed too. It felt a lot more like a first-person shooter as opposed to in Fallout 3. It's kind of weird. It's kind of clanky. But I use VATS most of the time anyway. So.
Same here. I don't aim.
Yeah,
forget
don't
that.
aim. Just. Fucking, you have VATS. You have superhuman powers.
You know that I have other problems with Fallout 4. I think it's one of the most boring games that's ever been made. But you know what? That's not what we're talking about here.
We're not talking about that.
Something else.
Yeah.
But also, what about let's talk for a second about the combat style. Because as soon as I heard the announcement that it was first person, immediately I'm thinking to myself, it's going to be focused on mostly range-based combat, which, you're going to have laser guns, you're going to have machine guns.
Sure.
Witcher was focused mainly on melee combat.
Right.
In fact, even though you had a crossbow, if an enemy was far away, it took a second, they were hard to deal with. In fact, any enemy that I couldn't kill with Whirl, and I just pushed that I just did Whirl over and over and over until everyone was dead. Any enemy I couldn't kill with the Whirl wasn't really worth going after. So I heard that and I was excited. I was like, is it going to be a shoot and loot, kind of like Borderlands? Is it going to be like this, some other first person? Because I know if you're going to spend most of your time with a gun, 90% of the time, it almost kind of should be in first person because it lets you aim more. And I know immediately you're going to think to yourself, well, what about games like Tomb Raider, The Last of Us? What about some games that have they're very range focused, but you push a button and you go over the shoulder and then you shoot.
Right.
And to that I would respond that really those games are about something else other than shooting. Those games are about, in the case of The Last of Us, it was about a little bit of stealth and strategy and seeing through walls.
Well, hang on now.
In the case of Tomb Raider, it was about climbing, right?
Hang on now.
If the game is primarily about aiming a gun, it kind of has to be first person.
Okay, well, hang on now. But they said there's going to be stealth elements. You can create your character your character class will be whatever you choose to do in the game. You don't pick a class and you move on, from what I've heard. You just play the game.
They compared it to Dishonored, which I'm actually kind of scared about.
Why? Did you not like that game?
I mean, I tried it about 4 times, and then finally I played it, and I was like, I'm going to take this seriously, and I got through the whole game, and I was like, you know what, that was actually pretty cool. But the reason is not because I have something against first person, it's because I have something against first person stealth.
Well, okay, here's my point. Okay, so let's say you want to play this game, because it is an RPG. It's an RPG first. They've been saying this for God knows how long, especially since this backlash has started. They said it's RPG first, not a first person shooter. Okay, fine. If you want to be a stealthy character in the game, I would imagine that most gamers prefer third-person stealth environments.
I am one of those people. I'll raise two hands up to that. I prefer third-person stealth.
Because like what we just discussed earlier, you basically have superhuman powers. You can look behind you. You have a peripheral vision of sorts, because you're looking over, you can turn the camera and you can see the corresponding doorway or a hallway, and you're like, okay, that enemy is coming down. I got to time my thing just right. And I haven't played Dishonored. I haven't. So, feel free to interrupt me if I'm wrong. But a stealth mechanic in something like Dishonored, you take risks as far as peeking your head out or going for it and trying to sneak up on somebody, because you don't have peripheral vision, you don't have senses, you don't have it's a lot more challenging when it comes to that.
They do. I know there's very few games now, and this is including Far Cry and some others. There's very few games that ask of you stealth in the first person without also giving you a trick to see through walls. You need to be able to account for at least where the enemies start. Now, once you're in the thick of it, okay, it's a lot harder, because I end up like, I think I have everybody accounted for, and as I'm going, and then suddenly an alarm goes off because, like you said, the first person was restricting, was putting me in a box, making it so I could only see the people in front of me. I think it's way more intense and way more terrifying, if I'm hiding in that trash can or something and I'm playing Metal Gear Solid, right? I'm hiding in the trash can. A guard is creeping up on me. I think it's a lot more terrifying in third person than if I'm in first person. I climb into a dumpster and just count 10 Mississippi and hope nobody's there when I climb back out. It's just not the same.
Yeah. So I would go see, like, and you know what, this all could be remedied really if they just showed a little bit of gameplay, and now I understand that it's developing games is really hard.
Wouldn't you think of more things to complain about?
Well, maybe, yeah, but at least I would have a visual and like, okay, I see where they're going with this. I can see where I can see it with my own eyes instead of like trying to visualize what they're trying to do, because in that, inevitably people will start pulling from other games that have already been created. Borderlands, Dishonored, Mirror's Edge, like oh, what's it going to be like? How's the mechanics going to work? I don't know. And so people
is my motion sickness going to flare up?
That's a real thing. That is a real thing. That is a real thing. People do get motion sickness. It is debatable,
however. How do these people walk around? Because in the real world, we're first person. So do these people go around staggering into the walls?
No. Like I said before, we have other senses that help us carry on in the world. Like, oh, I have a sense of where I am, because not just my sight, but my feet are firmly planted on the ground. I can feel my toes. The balance, gravity, all the other scientific things that you can think of that other than your eyesight. Blind people get around just fine. Well, not just fine, but just some people, like some blind people, they freaking figure it out. They know where things are because of their other senses.
So if blind people aren't being considered in the making of this game, why do you think that those poor souls that get motion... I can understand getting motion sickness from Mirror's Edge. The point of that game was to give you motion sickness, and that game's awesome. But just because I'm in first person, I'm sorry.
But okay, but again, though, I say this though. I say that this wouldn't be such a big issue if it wasn't CD Projekt Red making this game. Now, if it was EA that made a new IP that was completely different, people would not care. People wouldn't give a shit. They'd be like, "Oh, that's cool. Moving on. I'm not going to get it because I don't like first-person games, but whatever. Cool. That's awesome." And they wouldn't even go on the forums. They would just be like, not give a shit. But because it's CD Projekt Red and they made the best third-person open world experience that you can experience in a Western RPG, That's where period.
Yeah.
You know, they killed it. They knocked every other competitor out of the park with that fucking game. And, you know, people were just like, okay, make more of that. Please make more of this.
Okay. We're gonna come back to that, I think, because I think one way that in my mind would be a fun way to end this is if maybe in a kind of common ground kind of way, we talked about some of the things we loved about The Witcher 3 that could be implemented not only in 2077 but in any game to make them an amazing game. But I feel as though there's a level of trust that I have for this company. Even I was not really, you know, plussed by the trailer. I thought the trailer was kind of mediocre. I was like, Cyberpunk to me has a different vibe than that, and I'm more excited about what's in my head than what I'm seeing is more like a you know, kind of like the Grand Theft Auto 3 trailers, how they were like, this is a large city and many things happen in this city. Sometimes crime happens. Like, put me to sleep. No, thanks. But the most exciting part of the trailer, I think it was for you as it was for me, was that CD Projekt Red logo because of how much we trust that company. And I feel like I know that you're big into music. I know you have some favorite bands that, like, if these bands said our next album is going to be a kazoo album, you would not question them. Okay,
that's not true. That's not true.
You would get excited.
That's not true. I'll give you an example. I will give. Okay, I'll give you a couple examples. Metallica. What was it? Some Kind of Monster. No, that was the documentary. But Saint Anger.
They cut their hair.
Saint Anger.
Over. Yeah, Saint Anger. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And then I'll give you another example. I don't know if you're into Panic at the Disco at all. Remember when Panic at the Disco first came out in 2006 or 2005? That was a fucking great record. It was amazing. It was like techie. It was like kind of techno, but rock. And it was kind of like Fall Out Boy, but not really. And it was super cool. Then they come up with the second record, and it's fucking Beatles. It's like, what? I like the Beatles, and it's a great record at looking at it upon reflection. But when it first came out, people were like, what the fuck is this? This isn't Panic at the Disco. This is the Beatles this is the Beatles. This is the Beatles. I'll listen to the Beatles. I don't need to listen to this. But yeah.
So you think like, and I feel like there's so many times when that has happened where it's like you hear the song and you know, you hear the song and sometimes I hear a song that's so good, I almost feel sad because I know that nothing else that band has made is going to be as good as that song. But then you hear another song by the band, and it's disappointing, not just because the song is bad, but because that band didn't know why the first song was good. And if they had, they could have tapped into that, and they could have said, you know, we found a kind of winning formula for something good that we're known for. So you're worried that CD Projekt Red is like the band that's like, I hate that I got famous off The Witcher. I'm going to do what I wanted to do the whole time and put out this other garbage. I think now that I look at it that way, that is a valid
Well, I actually had another analogy. I don't know if you'll agree with this analogy, but I thought it was kind of funny. Where is it? Hang on. My analogy was, hang on, let's make sure that I got it right. Okay, let's say for example, you're a horror movie buff. You love horror movies. You've watched them all, and there's the one director that's like the horror movie guy. You know, like he's Guillermo del Toro, but he kind of does other things too. But like, let's just say someone like Guillermo del Toro, who does specifically horror movie genres. That's what he does. Okay. And then he announces his new movie, and it's a teaser. Boom! Fucking Guillermo del Toro's new movie is coming out in 2019, blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, oh, I'm super excited. 2 years go by. And you're like, okay, cool, man. And then he announces the cast, and you're like super stoked. Oh, I wonder who it's going to be. Is it going to be Joaquin Phoenix? Is it going to be freaking, who's another great actor? Whatever, it doesn't matter.
Jared Leto.
Like, who's it going to be? Jean-Claude Van Damme. Wait, what? Huh? Wait a minute. Jean-Claude Van Damme. What? Now, personally, I love me some Jean-Claude Van Damme, and I would totally watch that movie. But if you're a super horror movie buff, you'd be kind of pissed. You'd be like, what the fuck is Jean-Claude Van Damme doing in my director's horror movie? How dare you?
No, I think it's funny that you bring up Guillermo del Toro specifically because he is the Creatures guy, but he's also an amazing director, and he's not just known for like the same Creatures guy that did Hellboy and Hellboy 2 is the same guy that also made the Pan's Labyrinth, which was a beautiful, absolutely gorgeous movie.
True.
And so it's like, you know, when that band comes out with another song that's just as amazing for a different reason, it's like twice as cool.
Okay,
so
yeah,
I can give them the benefit of a doubt to say, okay, you know, here was my guy. He's horror, and now he's going to make a romantic comedy. It's like, what? But we all have a huge amount of respect for directors that do that come out with something new, and it's awesome. And you're like, I'm so glad that they went there, because what they're proving is that they're good. CD Projekt Red could, with this game, prove that they're good at making games.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And they didn't just trip into something with The Witcher 3.
Right, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Point taken. However, you would honestly, you should still have a little tiny bit of doubt if Jean-Claude Van Damme was in like a horror movie buffs movie, horror movie director's movie. You know, just a little bit.
I'm actually, now that you've brought him up, I hope he's doing the voices for every character in Cyberpunk 2077, because I would buy that game 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like I said before, and far be it from me to like criticize a great company like CD Projekt Red. Now, here's my, like, a lot of people are like, these are whiny babies, and granted, there's a lot of whiny babies, but just they're whiny babies on the internet, period, like for any reason. But you still kind of have to look at it and go, okay, what if this, if you're the head of CD Projekt Red, do you just ignore all this, or you go, what can we do? What could we have done to maybe soften this sort of blow? Do you think they had any idea that this would be as big as it got?
They would not ask that. Like you said, this is a game that's been in production for a really long time, and this is something I have a bit of a rant against fans of movies and games in general, is that they see a little bit of piece of something that's in development, and then they finish it in their minds, and they look at it and it sucks because they made it in their imaginations, and then they take it out on the developer. But like, of all the people, CD Projekt Red head guys should know that this is something they've been trying and tooling with for 6 years, and made a decision after 6 years that first person was the best decision.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? 100%. I agree with you 100%.
So for, you know, miss me with all the people that come in, you know, when the game is 85% done and saying, I know better than you what this game needs. Oh, yeah. So I defer to them on that.
Yeah. They should definitely not waver. You know, they have a vision. They you know, and they're artists, and they shouldn't waver because of a loud minority. Absolutely.
I would hope that they didn't.
However, I'm trying to think of the however. I had a point, but now
you agree with me.
I do.
I do. To figure out how you don't agree with me.
Well, no, I'm trying to think like. I think we've talked about it. There are logical and reasonable reasons why people would be upset, you know, and I'm one of them. I don't think they should change for my selfish reasons at all. I'm just voicing my, you know, I'm not the only gamer that's like this. You know, I might be a little more picky than the general group of gamers that are out there. I think most people are like, you know, they just pick up a game and they play anything as long as it's good. And God, you know, good job, good on you for, you know, being that sort of gamer. But
you have standards, you have criteria.
No, I do. Well, standards and criteria have kind of been forced upon me because I'm not 12 anymore, and I don't have as much time to, you know, play, you know, as many games as possible, because I have a life, I have a job, I have a wife, I have a dog, I have things to take care of and be an adult about. So I have I only have a finite amount of time to dedicate to gaming. So now it kind of is forced on me is like, okay, what genres of games do I really, really like? Because now my time is very important to me. It's a lot more important to me than it was when I was 12, and I had time to broaden my horizons and play all these sorts of different games and figure out what I really liked. But now I was like, okay, I like role-playing games, adventure games that have a narrative. I like this. I like third-person games, and these are the ones I'm going to get. These are the ones I'm going to buy. I'm going to try them out, like on the.
That's fair. That's 100% fair. It really is. I mean, I can see kind of when you put it like that. I can see how if you have in your mind a catalog of every game that you love, and it looks like this, and you have a catalog of every game you don't like, and it looks like this, and all of a sudden you find out that Cyberpunk has been moved from this category because of the first person. Now it's being put and it's being compared to games that you don't like. Yeah, exactly. So, that's exactly right. And then look, man, people love Dishonored, they love Borderlands, they love those games, and those games have been successful, and by all means. But you are not those people.
I'm not those people. Exactly. I'm not those people, and so it kind of sucks. And it sucks so much that I had to voice my opinion about it and make a whole, 11-minute video about it, put it on YouTube, which was a lot because I voiced opinion because I felt strongly about it and because I'm trying to get better at, like, making videos and stuff.
I liked that video a lot. I thought that was one of the best ones that you've made. I really like not just seeing or talking about a game, or when I describe a piece of a game, like to see it in action. And you put that on that. So I feel like the quality of these are getting better.
Thanks.
I hope that you don't expect that to continue if you keep asking me to be in them. But you know what? I'll do my best.
Dude, yeah. I love talking to you. I love talking with you, period. You need to, are you ever going to visit ever?
No.
No? Okay. All right. Fuck you guys.
In fact, I'm actually going to delete your number after this podcast. And go away to parts unknown.
I think that is. I did want to. Okay, there was a comment on Reddit that summed up third person quite pretty good, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it.
Let's hear it.
So he goes, I think it's a he or she. I apologize. I don't mean to misgender you.
We kind of always assume he on Reddit. We always assume mid-20s, angry about certain political... Okay, go ahead.
He goes, first person, if anything, is a handicap. It limits your sight, movements, etc. in a way that is exclusive to video games. In real life, your other senses help you be more aware of your surroundings beyond your field of view. You can do actions independent of your vision. In a game, you have none of that to help you. When you play as a character in first person, you don't see the nuances in the way they walk and animate. A third person game allows the character to show their personality and their movement. Take Watch Dogs, for example. Aiden's movements are some of the most fluid and interesting in a while. His dash is very aggressive, and his coat sways with his momentum. I can extrapolate part of his character through his movements, despite not hearing much of his dialogue or seeing his motivations. I can't do that with most first-person characters. Take Corvo from Dishonored, for example. The vast majority of his personality is told to him through other characters. You're kind but vengeful. Only because the story said so, not because your actions were visibly showing them. Link from every Zelda game is another great example of how the personality of the protagonist is shown, not told. Wind Waker being the best example, with an art style being extremely expressive. My point is, first person is far more limiting than third person. It's limiting in ways that affect the player's perception of character as well as gameplay. I feel in the vast majority of first person games, your character might as well not be there. You're an observer looking through the window. The distinction is that the third person game has you observing the character in his environment. And the gameplay treats it as if the character belongs in the world and is aware of his environment. Many first-person games feel disjointed because the character is treated as an outsider to the world merely as a consequence of the limiting camera view. And I don't want to say this person's name and put him out there on the internet, but that was great. I think that summed it up, my reasoning why I like third-person games more than first-person games.
That's a good summary, I think, of some of the things that we've talked about. Kind of the limiting nature of it. But I think to speak to that, I would say that what he described mostly was how it is more difficult to tell a good story in first person. And he had really hit the nail on the head that in first person, especially if you have a silent protagonist, as Corvo pretty much was, I know that they do that so that you can project your own kind of like thoughts and feelings onto them, but it makes it so that everything is reactionary. And even in Half-Life 2, it's like the silent protagonist is very loudly silent. He's almost like, it's almost very disbelievable. And I feel this way about the Zelda games too. It's unbelievable that you would walk around and everyone would just shout at you, continuing the story, using you and like just borrowing you while you're there. Hey, now you're here. Let's go this way. Like that doesn't really, it is disengaging. But, however, even though it is harder to tell a good narrative that way and it's harder to tell a good story that way, that says nothing about making the gameplay worse, because Borderlands was so much fun. It was fun. It wasn't about the story. And other, kind of first-person shooter, we love GoldenEye 007 for all of its faults. We love GoldenEye 64 because it was so much fun and it was a great game. And it didn't really matter in that time how limited we were, because the fun was limitless, if that makes any sense.
That makes complete sense. Absolutely.
So I if there's one company, because the thing I think that separated Witcher 3 the most from any other game made up until that point, and insofar as I can tell, other companies have not caught up to them, was depth of character. Was like these really, really multi-dimensional characters that you interacted with. All of them had a mother and father, all of them had children, all of them had something they loved, something they feared, something they hated. They all had a dream. The decisions that you made were never clear cut with them. Some of them hated you for doing the right thing. Some of them loved you for doing the wrong thing.
Right.
And it was so real and so alive. I've never played a game with more living characters in a living world than that one. Because in other games, even, in a Zelda game, as great as they are, a character, an NPC is just standing there, and maybe they're an angry old man because they don't have juniper berries, and then you bring them juniper berries, and they're happy. And that's the extent of their character, is either angry old man or happy. And it wasn't like that at all with The Witcher 3. So if there's one studio that I trust to overcome those difficulties that come with building a character, because they also made one of the most memorable and fun protagonists to be, Geralt, it's CD Projekt Red. And so I see so much potential here. Where you see limits being put on them, I see potential to blow us all away.
Yeah, I'm kind of saying my disappointment, but let me just say something positive about this. All this is like, it is, given their incredibly great track record of making just great single player experiences, or just the best single player experiences. Let's not pigeon-foot the... Anyway,
that is an expression that I am not familiar with. Perhaps it is a national
I was trying to find an expression. I couldn't find it. But
let's not pigeon-foot.
There's a 99% chance that they are going to change the role-playing game experience through a first-person lens with this game. Much like in the same way,
I would love for that to happen.
Much like in the same way when first person first started coming out, and be like, oh my gosh, it's like you're there, I believe the first person game was called Maze Wars, and as you just walk through a maze and things would come at you or something, some such, and like flight simulators, when flight simulators first came out, people lost their minds. They're like, oh my God, it's like I'm in an airplane. This is incredible. And I feel like CD Projekt Red, if any company can do that level of astonishment and amazement, it's CD Projekt Red. It's that, they're the company that do it.
Think of how crappy a third-person flight simulator would be if you're behind the pilot's head in the cockpit and you have to you move your hand over to the controls to flip switches and stuff.
You're like, gosh dang it.
I know. Be like, just get out of the way.
I feel like there's a game on like the original PlayStation. When PlayStation first came out, there was like a airplane game that you would play, and then it had different points of view, and one was inside the cockpit. I can't remember which game that was, but that was. Man, I remember like when PlayStation first came out. Do you remember? Because you never had a PlayStation, did you?
I remember the pixels being real big.
Oh man. Or just like any system. It's so funny when you look back at the old systems that we used to play. And I remember when I got the PlayStation, like in the first year it came out, I had a demo disc, and it had the first Need for Speed on there. Oh, and nice. The funnest part of that game was that you would get through the track, and if cars were finished ahead of you, they would just stay there, and you could just run into them. And so what I did is I just hung back, waited for all the cars to line up on the road, and then I'd like 200 miles an hour just charge into these cars and do all these flips and stuff. It was the first part of the game. Not the actual racing.
That sounds awesome. The game Burnout, I think, was made for you, showing that exact desire.
Yeah, I don't play much racing games anymore. There's
so few good ones on the PC. I actually played a lot of racing games on the PC trying to find a good one, and I couldn't. So racing games are just, I think, forever going to be on the console.
Well, I think that pretty much sums up the Cyberpunk thing. I think we didn't get anywhere, but I think hopefully people listening to this will understand that it's yes, there are a bunch of people whining on it, but I think we've peeled back some of those toxic layers and looked at the real reason why people would be a little bit perturbed by the first person perspective announcement. But it's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. Period. Like my preference notwithstanding, it's gonna be a fantastic game. Period. And I wish CD Projekt the fucking best. I hope they don't waver at all. I hope they do what they want to do and what they feel like they should do, and that's it. That's it for that. Is there anything pressing that you want to talk about? Any sort of dramas out there in the sphere that you want to talk about? You want to get into before we sign off?
Let me bring up one more really good thing that I liked about The Witcher 3 that I think you can apply to, and another reason why I think, like, when I think about The Witcher 3, I know that it was a great game, but it wasn't just a great game because it was in the third person. And so when I try to kind of analyze and try to pick apart the moral ambiguity in the game, because there have been many, many games that have come along that have a moral choice system. KOTOR, you've already mentioned. Yeah. Black and White is one. So is Fable is very, was known for its everything you do is either, going to affect this meter. Even Fallout 3 had a karma system where if you and kind of punishments and rewards based on that. Yeah. But they've all been kind of hollow because a gamer doesn't make a decision based on right or wrong. He or she makes a decision based on which outcome is going to be the most fun. What's going to be more game revealed by this that is fun to be in and fun to play. Mm-hmm. And The Witcher, from the very outset, shows you and tells you that everything's going to be a gray area. Sometimes you're not going to be rewarded for doing what you think is right. Sometimes you're going to be punished. Sometimes, things aren't going to add up. I remember specifically one of the very first quests that you get, you talk to a dwarf and he says, somebody burned my shop down. And so you say, I'm going to find him. And I remember I was really aggressively like, I'm going to do the right thing. And so I go and I do the mystery and I find the guy and he's like, I only did it because I hate dwarfs. And I was like reassured. I was like, yes, he's actually a racist in addition to being an arsonist. I found him. I've done the right thing. And the guy says, I can still remember it so clearly. He says something to the effect of like, I'll pay you off. My mom recently died. I have some money. I'll pay you off and you can let me go. And I was like, this is a trick by the game to make me deviate from the right path. I'm going to say, no, we're going to take you to, take you. And so you take him, and what happens to him is he gets hanged. And I was like, that's not what I wanted to have happen. He's an arsonist. He didn't hurt anybody. I was like, he was supposed to get like a fine and be put on bail. And it was so sobering when he got hanged because I was like, my decisions have a real consequence in this world, and I have to think before I do things. And amazingly, for the first time in a moral choice game, I actually wanted to do the right thing for its own sake, not because I knew I would never get completely rewarded, I would never get completely punished, and it would never be completely proportional to what I was doing. And so my decisions, I felt good about them because they were conscious decisions. Everything you did had this kind of like consequence, and I loved it. I remember another quest where you were talking to a succubus, and you had to like free this guy from her. This young man had been seduced by a succubus, and so I can't remember if you kill the succubus or turn her away. And the young man hates you. You saved his life, and he hates you because you took away the love of his life. And he didn't care about dying. He just wanted to be with this like temptress that had like seduced him or whatever. And it's that like idea of like this gray area. And Geralt was such a good character for that because he had like a sense of justice, but he was not naive about about the way that the world was. He knew that sometimes the world was going to kick him when he was down and hurt people that were innocent. Yeah. And he just kind of had to be steadfast and resolute through all of it. Well, I mean, and so I was just going to say that kind of gray area that they really committed to. And they didn't just put it in one or two places. They made it through the entire game. It was never completely clear what you had to do from a moral standpoint because there was always consequences. I loved that. And I thought that made for such a cool experience.
Absolutely. It's funny that you say that. I can recall in the first Dragon Age a scene like that where you're infiltrating the tower for the first time because it's been taken over by demons. And you come across this succubus. Well, I can't remember, but the succubus-like demon, where she has this Templar under her spell, and you're stuck with these choices. So you can release him, but by releasing him, you actually might kill him. But you don't know if that's and then you start conversing with the demon, and she starts making sense. His life is terrible. What I'm doing here, I'm filling his head with a good life, and this is an exchange. This is an exchange of his life force for his happiness. And so you're like, well, that actually kind of makes sense. If his life kind of sucks and he's stuck in this damn tower away from his family and he's really, depressed and like, well, I guess that's cool. I mean, like, you kind of make sense, but at the end of the day,
it was like extra layers.
Yeah. So they did in the first Dragon Age, of course, and then they started, getting more, plain after a while because, EA.
Dude, what if our lives right now are just the dreams that a succubus is giving us as she drains our life away?
That's, now we're getting into philosophy. Now we're getting to, is this all a simulation?
Think about that right before you go to bed, Shane.
I don't know. Video games bring up good philosophical questions. And by the way,
they save lives.
By the way, I feel like the world would be a lot better if there were more Geralts in the world. And I mean that because if you can't find a more stoic figure, a person who practiced the philosophy of stoicism than Geralt of Rivia, because nothing affects him. Mostly the small stuff doesn't affect him. Like all the racism that he gets and stuff, he's like, whatever. He's, it's a Witcher. And he's like, whatever. I don't give a shit. Like, because there are bigger things in the world. I'm trying to save your ass. I'm trying to save the world, you idiot. So just shut up.
I think I have a hope. That's my one concern the most, is that they're not going to have a protagonist in Cyberpunk that lives up to like what Geralt represented, I think, and how much fun Geralt was to be. Because somehow, I don't know how they did, I still to this day don't know how they did this, but every single dialogue choice, even though it would branch out to completely different options, none of them were contrary to Geralt's character. None of them went against like what he was, and he was always like, that blew me away. That completely blew my mind.
Absolutely.
And they had the ability to do that with that character.
Yeah, man. I mean, The Witcher 3, man, it's the best game. It's like the best game. I think I'm going to
play it again
Dude,
tonight.
Yeah. Now that we're talking about it, I kind of want to play it. I've played it like 5 times already, but man, I'll play it start over. I played like Game Plus, New Game Plus recently.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't realize that all the monsters are also New Game Plus. So it made the game even harder because, yeah, I have all this great equipment and everything, but it means shit. you know? Yeah, because I got to get
Sorry, Shane.
Yeah. Sorry, but whatever.
The next time I play it, I might play Blood and Wine by itself and start Blood and Wine where they just give you some stuff and they're like, go for it.
Yeah, and talk about like a fucking company that said, oh, you guys want some downloaded content? Well, guess what? We'll give you another game. We'll give you another 30-hour experience.
That's pretty amazing.
For a quarter of the price. There
was a lot of, the only thing I didn't like about Blood and Wine is, I resolved early on, I was hired to kill the monster, so I was like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to kill the monster. And all along the way, people were like, hey, wait a second. If you talk to him, and I'm like, no, I'm going to kill the monster. And they're like, but wait, there's even one, specific where the guy's like, I know that you've gone down this road, but it's not too late. If you get in that boat, it will be too late. And I'm like, to the monster. Straight to the monster. Then I go online and find out there's 77 different endings, and I missed out on all of them because I only played half of Blood and Wine because I did what I wanted to do.
You got the monster. You set a goal and you got it.
I vanquished that monster, and everything went horribly afterward. But whatever, the monster had been vanquished. But hey, I'm the guy that played KOTOR and killed what's-her-face, okay? Don't you remember how you guys laughed at me for 3 straight days when you found out that I killed Bastilla or whatever?
Bastilla, yeah.
Yeah, how you were supposed to talk her out of going to the dark side and change her mind, but I was like, you're coming at me? People that come at me die, so boom.
Dude, it's the dark side, man. I played the rest of the game
without her, and you're like, Bastilla, that's like a main character that you killed straight away.
Well, you know what? That's an interesting question, and as far as writing, because if she is coming at you, is it is the Jedi way to defend oneself, correct? It's not the dark side.
I don't know.
It's not the dark side. If you force conflict, that's part of the dark side. That's what you do. You're forcing conflict. You're attacking. Jedi are on the defensive, or usually more passive. They're like, I don't want to attack you. What's that famous? I don't want to. Wow, what did Obi-Wan say in the when he was facing Darth Vader, not Darth Vader, but Anakin. We was facing Anakin at the very tail end of part 3.
He said, "It's over, Anakin. I have the high ground." That's what he said. That's the quote you're trying to think of.
Yeah. I have the high ground. I will kill you.
Well, Shane, I can't answer any of your questions because I haven't talked to my Jedi pastor that I go see in Jedi church on Jedi Sundays. Okay. I don't know what the right thing to do would be in that situation.
Well, it's definitely not to kill Bastila, you idiot.
I'll play The Witcher 3 10 more times before I fire up KOTOR and try to do a Bastila with Bastila run.
Yeah, well, man, it was great talking to you again, man. I think that pretty much sums up everything that we've talked about.
Ever thought about,
especially when it comes to video game stuff. I love having you on the show. I hope the viewers love having you on the show. I think they do. Not sure.
Shane, I think both of them are thrilled.
It's Levi and CC.
I think both of them are absolutely thrilled.
All right, man. Well,
yeah, good talking to you, brother.
Yeah, good talking.
Until next time. I'm sure a week from now there'll be some other nonsense that gets us fired up. And we'll talk about that.
Oh, I'm sure.